Good evening, peoples. I'm Pastor Leia, and this is my friend Ginger Snap. So welcome back to our living room for our Tuesday evening Bible study series. So we have been looking at some of the Deuterocanonical or apocryphal books of the Bible, and there's some really fun stories in there. But this is kind of jumping back onto a series I did last year of Pastor Leia's Halloween costumes. For this year's Halloween costume, I went as one of the daughters of Zelophehad, who are, weirdly enough, not as popular of a story as they really ought to be, even though they are named 3 different times in the Hebrew Bible. They never come up in the lectionary, which is the recommended series of readings for each week through a 3-year cycle. They really should be in there. They're not. Anyway, it's a great story to lift up. As some of you might know, when I was in college, I did my undergrad thesis on costume design in film of the 20th century and kind of a 19th century fashion history and how that was chronicled. And so kind of have a thing for clothes. And I do think it's really interesting and has actually given me kind of a different perspective into some Bible stories of really thinking about what they would have worn and how that would have been made and what that would have meant for social status and how they were perceived by others in their society, especially for last year when I did Lydia, who is a seller of purple cloth. Obviously, clothes and fabric are a very key part of her story, and that was really, really interesting research to do. So this year, for the daughters of Zelophehad, who, if you don't recall, come up in the book of Numbers, which is part of the overall Exodus story. So very, very more ancient than Lydia, for sure. And I also kind of drew maybe a bit more inspiration from Edith Head's designs of costumes for the 10 Commandments rather than history per se, because Edith Head was an incredible costume designer who deserved every Oscar that she got. She worked with Audrey Hepburn a lot, if that's more helpful for people who are not costume history buffs, such as me. Anyway, so for example, like the color scheme, especially that I went with, the shades of blue, is very close to the colors that the wife of Moses wore in the film The 10 Commandments. So she also did just great things with beading and draping and just really, really gorgeous. Anyway, so the daughters of Zelophehad, as I said, are named 3 different times in the Bible. So their main story from Numbers 27, verses 1 through 7, then the daughters of Zelophehad came forward. Zelophehad was son of Hepher, son of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, son of Joseph, of the Manassite clans. The names of his daughters were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. They stood before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the leaders, and all the congregation at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and they said, "Our father died in the wilderness. He was not among the company of those who gathered together against the Lord in the company of Korah, but died for his own sin, and he had no sons. Why should the name of our father be taken away from his clan because he had no son? Give to us a possession among our father's brothers." Moses brought their case to the Lord, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "The daughters of Zelophehad are right in what they are saying. You shall indeed let them possess an inheritance among their father's brothers, and pass the inheritance of their father on to them." This is the word of the Lord. I don't do it as often as I would like to, but I think it's a really great biblical and preaching practice to memorize the scripture, to do a storytelling on Sunday mornings, because when you've taken the time to memorize something, it makes people think, oh gosh, this was worth memorizing. Maybe I should listen more carefully. And my late pastor and mentor kind of compared it to it's an unusual thing that people aren't used to. And so much in the same way that in the 16th century, when Martin Luther was starting to read the Bible in German to people, and they had never heard the Bible in the language that they spoke, storytelling is maybe the closest equivalent that we have to that kind of very new way of hearing the word. So there are 5 daughters, and they don't have any brothers. And so because inheritance laws go from father to son, they're going to be completely passed over just because they had the misfortune of being born as women. That was sarcasm, obviously, if you couldn't tell. So they go to Moses, and they're like, hey, Moses, this isn't fair. And our father's name should be remembered. And also we should not be living as impoverished, landless beggars in the promised land, because that's not cool. So we should be allowed to inherit, and so they are. Of course, the inheritance would still prefer that things pass on to sons, but in the case that there are no sons, the daughters may inherit. Inheritance laws throughout the world are quite interesting. It wasn't until I think 1848 that a woman could own property herself after she was married, because legally anything that she owned just went to her husband automatically when they got married, which I don't understand. But I also don't understand the patriarchy. Smash the patriarchy. It is what it is. Anyway, so yeah, but there is a catch. Later in Numbers 36, these 5 women come up again. Let's see, long list of names. Let's see, where does it start? Okay, so Numbers 36, 5. So then the other members of the Manassite clans come to Moses, and they're like, hey, so it's cool that the daughters can inherit, because, yeah, I guess, their father's name shouldn't be taken away from our clan, and they've got a point. But if they were to marry someone who wasn't part of our clan, then by the laws of inheritance and property rights and all of that, then the land would go to that other clan and would be taken away from our clan. So that's not something that we want. So the compromise is that the daughters can marry, let them marry whom they think best, which also the fact that they're not having their husband chosen for them by men of the family is kind of a bigger deal than it maybe seems at first glance. Only it must be into a clan of their father's tribe that they are married, so that no inheritance of the Israelites shall be transferred from one tribe to another. For all Israelites shall retain the inheritance of their ancestral tribes. Every daughter who possesses an inheritance in any tribe of the Israelites shall marry one from the clan of her father's tribe, so that all Israelites may continue to possess their ancestral inheritance. No inheritance shall be transferred from one tribe to another, for each of the tribes of the Israelites shall retain its own inheritance. The daughters of Zelophehad did as the Lord had commanded Moses. Mahlah, Tirzah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Noah, the daughters of Zelophehad, married sons of their father's brothers. They were married into the clans of the descendants of Manasseh, son of Joseph, and their inheritance remained in the tribe of their father's clan. So they're marrying cousins or second cousins or third cousins, whatever, as long as it's within their own clan. So they have fewer options, but I guess to be fair, it would be harder to meet people of, other tribes, I guess. I don't know. It's not the ideal situation from a modern feminist perspective, but isn't that very often the case? So the names of the daughters are also given in a different order here, which is interesting. Some commentators and preachers make a lot of this. Usually when names are listed in the Bible, it's in order of importance. But if they're switched up, then that kind of is maybe more equality among them. I don't know. I listened to a bunch of different sermons on the daughters of Zelophehad this past week when I was working on beading my costume, because there's a lot of beads all along the hems, lots and lots of tiny beads. Anyway, and so one of my I think my favorite sermon that I listened to kind of had this idea that the 5 daughters are named, and they're given different orders in different parts of the Bible, and they are 5 individuals. And it was kind of this great story about women supporting each other. Even though they are individuals with their own dreams and desires, they're still supporting each other. And it's not that they were going forward just for themselves, but on behalf of their family and their sisters. And so it's important to support your sisters or whatever. We think that we're needing bread now, really. Okay. Then, not just numbers, they also come up in Joshua 17. Now Zelophehad, son of Hepher, son of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, had no sons, but only daughters. And these are the names of his daughters: Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah, which is the same order as they are in the first story that I read. So I'm not sure how significant it is that it's a slightly different order in Joshua 36, but it is something to think about. So they came before the priest Eleazar and Joshua son of Nun and the leaders and said, "The Lord commanded Moses to give us an inheritance along with our male kin." They've now reached the promised land. So according to the commandment of the Lord, Joshua gave them an inheritance among the kinsmen of their father. Thus there fell to Manasseh 10 portions, besides the land of Gilead and Bashan, which is on the other side of the Jordan, because the daughters of Manasseh received an inheritance along with his sons. The land of Gilead was allotted to the rest of the Manassites. So I do kind of like that it's not just they're told that yes, they can inherit, but that we're then told this actually happened and the leaders carried through, which I think is a nice touch. So wanted to talk a little bit about Hebrew Bible fashions, if I may. So I didn't have as many layers as there historically should have been, mostly due to time, because I stitched all of this almost entirely by hand, other than the long seams on the dress and belt. So there would be an undershift and usually an outer garment also. Clothing would usually be out of wool. It was sturdier. It could also be linen, which is what I bought and used. Linen didn't hold dyes as well, so they might not have been as brightly colored as these. And they're definitely cooler than wool for sure. But linen is cheaper and easier to find than wool, so that's what I went with. And definitely in the 10 Commandments, we're looking at cottons and linens and not wools for sure. They definitely have just a really nice drape to them. So I have this long dress on the hook I put up for wreath last year. So I added beads along the neckline and the sleeves because I figured if I was hemming them by hand, I might as well add beads in there. Oh, you're interested in my dress, are you? And yet you didn't even want to wear your Halloween costume on Sunday. She was, if you were interested, a very reluctant pumpkin. We got like one decent picture and then pictures of her flopping melodramatically on the floor as if to say, "My ancestors were worshipped as gods in Egypt, and you put me in a pumpkin costume." Cats are just full of attitude. So there would be an underdress and an overdress. But of course, a very important thing would be the veil. I could easily talk about veils and headscarves in liturgical fashion and significance for well over an hour, which I'm not going to. But anyway, nice veil here, very important for sun protection, for sure, is definitely a big thing, and also ritual significance. I ended up sewing some hair combs into the front hem so that it would stay better in my hair, which I thought was a rather clever thing to do. So I've got a long belt that I sewed little beads into and stitches, which seemed like a good idea at the time and seemed like increasingly less of a good idea as the hours went on of the stitching. So perhaps the most fun thing that I made is this bead net collar necklace, which took about 16 hours to make. There were one really fun thing in ancient Egyptian fashion that I just love. It's just so stupidly impractical. There would be whole dresses made out of bead netting like this. And we've got a few surviving examples of them in museums, which is just so cool. Of course, that like the strings holding them together have like fallen apart. But given like how they've been laid and the impressions that they've left or whatever, we can piece together what they looked like. And so there's like it's not, of course it's not connecting because I'm on camera. Anyway, but I just love how just stupidly impractical they are. But anyway, I kind of figure that out in the wilderness there would be kind of a lot of downtime. And so I liked the idea of the sisters doing this beading work in the evening while they were camping. So that was a thing that I put together. So piercings, like pierced ears, weren't as much of a thing in this generation as they would have been for like, me. So I went without earrings because I don't really own any clip-ons. And I added an additional nose ring. We just kind of pretended I didn't have this that day because I don't actually know how to take it out. It hasn't really come up in the however many years that I've had it. So anyway, that's completely irrelevant factoid. So I went with kind of gold jewelry. Jewelry would have been important because it's easily transportable wealth and something that a woman would carry into her wedding. Of course, there's several stories where gold earrings or rings or bracelets or whatever are melted down and turned into other things, especially throughout the Exodus narrative. But I wanted the daughters of Zelophehad to keep their jewelry because their father was not in the rebellion of Korah. There's a really should get into that whole story at some point. It's weird as heck. But there's this group that even though God has been with them this whole time and led them out of slavery and parted the Red Sea and the pillars of fire and all this, because we are humans, we were still afraid that even though things had worked out so far, more or less, it might not continue to be that way. And especially the longer that they were in the wilderness, the less likely it might have seemed that they would reach the promised land. And so there was a rebellion of people who were like, Moses, yeah, we want a different leader, actually. We kind of want you out. Yeah, we want to impeach you. But God wasn't on board with that, and so the entire rebellion of Korah and his followers and their families were swallowed up by the ground, which is the sort of intense divine retribution that I'm not always sure what to do with, honestly, in the Bible. But anyway, the daughters of Zelophehad are very clear to point out our father was not among those men. He did not forfeit his right to an inheritance in the promised land. If he hadn't died, he would be getting this inheritance, and if he had had any sons at all, they would have received our father's inheritance, so therefore we should. It is interesting that they note he died for his own sin, which a lot can be made of that little line. Obviously, all humans sin. We are not perfect. We are not Jesus. But even though he sinned, his sin specifically was not rebelling against God's hand-picked leader of the people, which is interesting. Anyway, several sermons that I listened to really went in on that line, which I didn't think was the most essential part of the story. I really liked the idea of the daughters protesting against this very sexist inheritance law, and the idea that they should be remembered. And it's great that they are remembered, and they are named 5 different times throughout the Bible, and yet they don't come up in the lectionary cycle. This is this is legitimately a great story. Even not from a postmodern feminist perspective, whatever, like it's a good story, and it's a story about justice that has a satisfying ending, and it's themes of the laws are what they are, but they are intended to be for the benefit of the people, and if they are failing to be for the benefit of all the people, the laws can be changed, and we can have conversations with God and leaders and the establishment about making things more just, and we can speak up against injustice, and we can ask for people to be treated fairly, because things don't change if no one tries to make changes, Yeah, so I really like this story. I had kind of asked some of my female pastor colleagues what story should I do this year. And I was between a couple, but I decided to go for this one because I just really liked that theme of the daughters having a voice, because there are so few female characters in the Bible, named female characters also. I think someone said that these 5 women represent 3% of the named female figures in the Bible. I don't remember if that was in the Old Testament specifically, but there are 4 women with names, and that is unusual. To put it mildly. But the fact that they are, all 5 of them are named, and that they are named 3 times is significant. And remembering women's stories are important. They don't always get written down as often, and certainly not in the Bible. They don't get written down as often, but they're worth remembering and worth telling and repeating, because just as their father's name was not taken away from their clan, neither were their names taken away from their clan. Hey, sweetheart, come back up here. Yep. Just sitting next to the Bible and looking up at me. Cats are so weird. Maybe she's still annoyed about the pumpkin thing. Also, I should mention we had a great turnout for our canopy on the corner. We got cleaned out of all of our cookies and postcards by like 7. So we packed up and went home not too long after that. So quite successful. We saw lots of kids and families, and got to share cookies and postcards with them. So that was neat. So people's good night. I hope to see... Don't you start eyeing my very intricate beadwork, you cat, with your paws. I was thrilled that we didn't have working heat in the manse for a while. It got repaired a couple weeks ago, and because she can be lounging in front of the warm air on the wall, she's just been there, like just a magnet to that space, so her little paws were not trying to bat at my bowl of beads, which I very much appreciate. Oh, also, as I'm waving my hands around, ancient nail polish was a thing. So I'm sure you all know that I do my nails like every week. It's a little hobby of mine. I like being able to see color when the world is often a very dark place. But ancient nail polish is a thing. So I used henna to stain my nails, which is so cool. It's a very different kind of color finish than I'm used to seeing. It's not like, even and shiny like nail polish would be. But I just think it's really cool that throughout history, women and men have wanted to like add color into their lives. Oh, well, how did I completely forget this entire like section of things I was excited to talk about? Also, black eyeliner could also have been green, or I think blue was an option, usually black. But the way that they made kohl eyeliner, it's got these like antimicrobial properties, so it would protect the eye from like infection and sand. So like the reason that ancient people would wear a bunch of eyeliner was not just decorative. It was very practical, because sand blowing around, don't really want that in your eyeballs, and so the fact that it's like got antimicrobial properties is like very convenient. It's like a health and safety thing as much as a decorative thing. And henna has like antifungal properties, and I think it's supposed to be like really good for skin and nails. Also, my nails are going to be permanently stained until they grow out. They'll probably be covered by nail polish in between then, but that's really interesting. It's kind of slightly speculation of whether living people would henna their nails. The archaeological record kind of is harder to tell that way, but a lot of mummies had their fingers or fingernails painted after death, which is a really interesting ritual for taking care of bodies. But anyway, I thought that would be a fun thing to include, and just something that I wanted to try, because the fact that people did this historically is just so cool. And yeah, the history of makeup is just fascinating. And another thing that I will not get into too much, because I could also talk for a very long time about it, maybe longer than people wanted to hear. Anyway, good night, peoples. I hope to see some of you at our Thursday Zoom fellowship time at 5 and at our Sunday morning worship. Friendly reminder, this week the clocks change, so we get an extra hour of sleep. It's the good time change Sunday, not, as I call it in the spring, sad clock Sunday. So if you are so inclined, you might wear your pajamas to church, because this is a little tradition that we have of wearing pajamas to church on time change Sundays, because why not, I suppose. We will also be celebrating All Saints Sunday. Technically on the calendar, All Saints Day was yesterday. Today is All Souls Day, which in Protestant traditions kind of get blurred together a bit more than they do in other church traditions, because our definition of saint is different than the Catholic definition of saint. We'll be getting more into that on Sunday. So anyway, High Holy Day, so we will be remembering people who have died and talking about how grief is an aspect of love, but also shapes our faith, and how our faith plays into that, and remembrance and absence. And anyway, it is one of, this 3-day season, Halloween, All Saints Day, and All Souls Day, are my favorite liturgical season. And I just love the themes of telling the stories of people that we've lost who have inspired us, whether that is the daughters of Zelophehad, Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah, or whether it is someone like my grandmother, whose wedding ring I wear. People who have gone before us have shaped who we are, and it's important to talk about that and remember that, because just because people are gone doesn't mean that they didn't exist. They're still in our hearts, and we believe that they are with God, and that is worth talking about, because if we genuinely believe in the resurrection, then we should be comfortable talking about death. I feel like I've tried to say goodnight about 8 times now, and then gotten sidetracked as one does. Are you coming back to say goodnight? I'm here. No, meow yourself. So, until next time, friends, good night.